In the serene suburbs of Cedar Pines, the Dawson family exemplified what many would consider the quintessential middle-class American lifestyle. James and Tina Dawson, the devoted parents of 2 daughters, were well regarded in their community as model citizens. To their neighbors, they represented the highest ideals of virtue, raising their twin daughters, Lena and Laura, in a home that prioritized values, discipline, and a steadfast commitment to religious faith. Lena and Laura Dawson were a striking duo, characterized by their identical jet black hair and captivating green eyes, appearing almost as reflections of one another. Throughout their childhood, they were inseparable, navigating life as if connected by an invisible thread that only they could perceive. They shared a unique bond, often completing each other's sentences and anticipating each other's thoughts without the need for words. Their closeness was a source of admiration for some and envy for others. As they matured, Lena and Laura began to recognize a deeper connection between them, one that transcended the typical boundaries of sisterhood. In hushed conversations during the stillness of the night, they revealed feelings to one another that neither could fully understand. It began with subtle glances and lingering touches, moments that quickened their hearts and left them with a mix of exhilaration and guilt that was inescapable. They both instinctively knew that this was a truth they could never share with the outside world, especially not with their parents. James Dawson, a man of unwavering principles and a retired military officer, had raised his daughters with a firm hand, believing that discipline and order were essential to a respectable life. Religion played a central role in his existence, and he attended church every Sunday without fail, often insisting that the girls accompany him, even when they showed clear disinterest. To James, any deviation from his moral standards was seen as a flaw that required correction. The commitment to family values was paramount for him, as he sought to ensure that his daughters adhered to these principles. Tina Dawson, while equally traditional, approached her strictness from a place of profound fear, having been raised in a conservative environment. This upbringing instilled in her a rigid worldview, where any deviation from societal norms was not merely disapproved of but outright condemned. Tina was a woman who placed great importance on appearances, constantly concerned about how others would perceive her daughters if they deviated from the path she had meticulously laid out for them. The twins, feeling stifled, learned to adapt by feigning interest in the suitors their mother attempted to introduce and indulging her aspirations of future weddings and grandchildren. However, they were acutely aware that these dreams belonged to a reality they could not embrace. They harbored a secret that, if revealed, would dismantle their parents' beliefs and expose them to scorn and animosity in a society that would not comprehend their truth. As Lena and Laura transitioned into adulthood, their bond deepened, evolving into a complex relationship that surpassed mere affection. Yet, living under the vigilant scrutiny of their parents necessitated that they conceal their feelings, restraining them to the shadows of their private existence. Their mother's incessant reminders about dating and marriage became a source of anxiety. Each suggestion of a suitable young man felt like a tightening noose around their shared secret. They were not only concealing their emotions from the outside world, but also from themselves, trapped in the tension between their love and societal expectations. The mounting pressure of societal expectations weighed heavily on the Dawson family, particularly as Tina became increasingly aware of her daughter's disinterest in romantic relationships. Over the years, the expectations from their parents had intensified, leading Tina to suspect that something was amiss. She initially attributed her daughter's lack of interest in boys to a phase they would eventually outgrow with proper guidance. However, as Lena and Laura continued to evade discussions about dating, her initial suspicions morphed into disappointment and frustration. To Tina, it seemed they were unappreciative of the stable, morally sound environment in which they had been raised. In a moment of vulnerability, Tina shared her concerns with her husband, James. With his characteristic military precision, he concluded that action was necessary. He proposed that they confront their daughters, aiming to reason with them and, if needed, seek external assistance. What had once been perceived as a close sibling bond now appeared to James and Tina as a troubling deviation that required correction. They began to feel a sense of urgency, believing that their daughter's behavior could potentially tarnish the family's reputation if left unaddressed. One December evening, the Dawson family gathered for what started as a typical family dinner. However, the atmosphere quickly shifted into a tense confrontation that would irrevocably alter their lives. Under the pretense of casual conversation, James and Tina began to question their daughters about their future aspirations, their disinterest in marriage, and the peculiar behaviors that had not gone unnoticed by others. Caught off guard, Lena and Laura exchanged anxious glances, sensing the gravity of the situation. This moment had always been a source of dread, as they were acutely aware that the day would arrive when their secret could no longer remain hidden. However, they were unprepared for the hostility that ensued. James, unable to suppress his frustration, accused them of selfishness and ingratitude, claiming they had rejected the values he had diligently instilled in them. Tina, her voice quivering with rage, labeled them an embarrassment to the family, a disappointment that had become too significant to overlook. She reminded them of the moral principles they had been taught, emphasizing the importance of family and honor. When the facade finally crumbled, Lena and Laura revealed the nature of their bond, hoping for compassion even in the face of misunderstanding. Instead, their parents responded with outrage and revulsion. Tina, trembling with fury, condemned them for their perceived sins, branding them an abomination in the eyes of God. James, equally furious, insisted they would see a psychiatrist the following morning, threatening to expose their secret to the world if they did not change, proclaiming their condition as a sickness and a sin. The impact of his words was more painful than any physical wound for Lena and Laura. This was not merely a reprimand but a profound betrayal, a total rejection of their true selves. They had always suspected their parents would not comprehend their situation, yet they had not foreseen the depth of the hatred and rejection they would encounter. That night, as they lay together in their shared room, Lena and Laura were engulfed by a tumult of emotions: hurt, anger, humiliation, and an escalating sense of despair. They felt trapped and isolated. There appeared to be no avenue ahead that did not lead to anguish and disgrace. The very individuals who were meant to provide them with unconditional love, their parents, had turned against them, threatening to expose their secret and subject them to a lifetime of mockery and contempt. As the hours passed, the seeds of resentment began to take root. For the first time, they entertained a notion they had never dared to consider, a means to end their suffering and liberate themselves from those who sought to ruin them. In the enveloping darkness, with only each other for solace, they began to devise a plan. This plan, born of desperation, would irrevocably change their lives, steering them down a path from which there would be no return. As the hours dragged on, the twins lay in their bedroom, restless and haunted by the echoes of their parents' angry words. It was a frigid December night, yet Lena and Laura felt none of the winter's chill. Instead, they were consumed by a tightening grip of fear and rage, a storm that simmered, its intensity heightened by the oppressive silence that had descended upon the Dawson household. In the bleak darkness, they whispered to one another, plotting a future unburdened by their parents' condemnation, a life where they could finally exist without concealment. Their hushed words contained the seeds of something both frightening and oddly liberating: the notion of eliminating the source of their oppression. Lena was the first to articulate it, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. "We cannot continue like this, Laura," she murmured, her voice laced with urgency. "If they are not here, no one else will know." Laura gazed at her sister, her heart racing. A flicker of fear coursed through her chest, but it was swiftly supplanted by an unusual sense of tranquility as the realization settled in. In that instant, the bond between them solidified, strengthened by a mutual pain and anger that only they could comprehend. In the stillness of their room, their plan began to take shape, a plan that demanded bravery, precision, and a complete detachment from the life they had known. Throughout the following day, Lena and Laura navigated the house with a deliberate calmness, masking their intentions beneath a facade of obedience. Their parents observed them closely, anticipating signs of defiance or rebellion. However, the twins remained intentional in their compliance. They participated in dinner without objection, listening quietly as James and Tina reiterated their plans to send them to therapy for correction. Yet, beneath this composed exterior, Lena and Laura were preparing. They had spent the morning meticulously studying the house, pinpointing areas they could exploit to their advantage. They were well acquainted with the family's routines: the times their father secured the house, the manner in which their mother checked the doors before retiring for the night, and the precise order in which they prepared for sleep. They committed every detail to memory, ready to leverage that knowledge to execute their plan. As their parents slept soundly that evening, Lena and Laura reviewed their strategy one final time. They understood that meticulousness was essential, any misstep could lead to failure, and any moment of hesitation could jeopardize their freedom. They took a moment to steady themselves, locking eyes with a shared understanding this was their sole path to escape, a grim yet definitive route toward liberation. Around midnight, Lena and Laura. They traversed the dimly lit house with utmost stealth, having intentionally chosen this moment, fully aware that their parents were soundly asleep and oblivious to their presence. Lena took the lead, her movements deliberate as she wielded a small flashlight to illuminate their path through the corridor. Laura followed closely behind, gripping a heavy wrench she had retrieved from the garage earlier that day, her hold steady as she braced herself for the impending actions. As they neared their parents' bedroom, where James and Tina lay unaware of the peril that loomed just outside their door, Lena, though calm, felt the tension rise within her. She cautiously pushed the door ajar, just enough to glimpse her parents sleeping peacefully. Nodding to Laura, she signaled that the moment had arrived. With her heart pounding, Laura lifted the wrench, her gaze fixed on her mother's form in the bed. She understood that hesitation was not an option, there could be no room for doubt. In a swift, decisive motion, she swung the wrench down, targeting her mother's head. Tina stirred momentarily before the impact rendered her unconscious. Laura continued her grim task, her expression devoid of emotion as she struck with cold detachment. Meanwhile, Lena positioned herself beside her father's side of the bed. James began to awaken, startled by the commotion, but Lena acted swiftly, covering his mouth with one hand while pressing a pillow over his face with the other. James struggled against her, his eyes wide with disbelief, but his resistance quickly diminished as he fought for breath. Observing her sister's struggle, Laura moved to assist, adding her weight to the pillow until James lay still, the light fading from his eyes. In those fleeting moments, the Dawson household succumbed to an eerie silence, interrupted only by the remnants of their actions. The subdued, labored breaths of the two sisters filled the room as they stood beside the bed, grappling with the reality of their actions. It was a paradoxical experience, both liberating and terrifying, instilling a surreal blend of power and fear that left them trembling. Their hands quivered as they collected their belongings, carefully packing a few essential items and gathering any money they could find. They had meticulously planned their escape, understanding the necessity of being swift and discreet to evade suspicion. Taking only what was essential, they moved quietly through the house, securing the front door behind them as they slipped into the night. Outside, the air was crisp and biting, stinging their skin as they navigated down the street, remaining in the shadows and moving with determination toward the bus station at the town's edge. There, they intended to board a bus to a nearby city far enough to avoid recognition yet close enough to allow for travel on foot without drawing attention. For the initial hours, everything unfolded as planned. They boarded the bus, deliberately turning their faces away from any inquisitive gazes and settling into their seats. Their minds raced with a tumultuous mix of fear and exhilaration, reveling in their newfound freedom, unshackled from the life that had stifled them for so long, liberated from the expectations and judgments that had once defined their existence. However, they would soon discover that freedom was a fleeting illusion. The following morning, the bodies of James and Tina Dawson were found by a neighbor who had come to check on them. The scene that met her was one of horror, revealing the lifeless forms of two cherished members of the community. The news of the twins being slain in their own home spread rapidly, shocking the town and instilling a sense of fear within the community. The police were summoned, and an investigation commenced, with detectives meticulously searching the Dawson residence for any evidence that could unveil the identity of the perpetrators. As the inquiry progressed, suspicion quickly shifted towards Lena and Laura, who had mysteriously disappeared without a trace, leaving no clues regarding their location or intentions. Detectives conducted interviews with friends, neighbors, and family members, striving to construct a comprehensive understanding of the Dawson family dynamics and the underlying tensions that had existed for years. The family's rigid values, the twins' hesitance to engage in romantic relationships, and a heated argument that had occurred just days prior to the murder all suggested a possible motive. Furthermore, investigators uncovered a series of concealed journals in the girls' room, containing intimate writings that expressed their feelings for one another, their struggles with their identities, and their anxieties regarding their parents' disapproval. These journals depicted a poignant narrative of two young women ensnared in a society that refused to accept them, compelled to conceal their true selves out of fear and shame. The revelation of the sisters' relationship further shocked the community, intensifying speculation and condemnation. For many, the murders represented an act of pure evil, a calculated betrayal of familial trust. However, for others, the journals conveyed an alternative narrative, one of two young women driven to desperation by a society that offered them no other options. The twins' quest for freedom was abruptly curtailed. Days later, Lena and Laura were apprehended at a small motel on the outskirts of the city, where they had been living and evading capture by frequently changing locations. A tip from a motel employee who recognized them led the police directly to their whereabouts. Upon the police's arrival, Lena and Laura were taken into custody without any resistance. They sat side by side in the interrogation room, their expressions inscrutable as they faced the detectives who questioned them. They remained silent, providing no explanations for their actions or justifications for the lives they had taken. However, the evidence against them was substantial: journals, testimonies from neighbors who had observed the tension within the Dawson household, and fingerprints found at the crime scene all indicated their culpability. In court, they displayed little emotion, their faces devoid of expression as the prosecution recounted the horrific events of the December night. They listened in silence as the judge delivered their sentence, fully aware that they would never again experience the freedom they had once desired. The story of Lena and Laura Dawson became a chilling reminder of the repercussions of secrecy, repression, and the profound impact that societal expectations can impose on those who dare to challenge them. Some regarded the twins as monsters, cold-blooded killers who had betrayed their own family, while others perceived them as tragic figures, victims of a society that had refused to accept them for who they truly were. In the years that followed, the Dawson murders transformed into a cautionary tale, recounted in hushed tones by those who had once known the family. The house where the murders occurred remained abandoned. A quiet reminder of the atrocities that had transpired within its confines, the once immaculate room was now marred by the recollection of violence and treachery. Meanwhile, Lena and Laura found themselves confined to separate prison cells, their lives eternally intertwined by the dark secret they had once held together. What was once a source of strength and solace had transformed into a prison in itself, binding them to an inescapable memory and a past that would forever haunt them.